school of thought of development studies which is rooted in ground realities. Let me try to explain what I mean here. Quite often I feel a little frustrated when I have the impression that we are not contributing that much by learning development studies. Of course, the purpose of social science is not just to be useful. We should not take that kind of instrumentalist view of social science. It's also a goal in itself to learn and to understand what is happening around us. But I think that in a country like India, one would not feel really happy as a social scientist unless somewhere along the line we feel that we can also contribute something useful. And of course, I think sometimes we do learn very useful things even in the mainstream development studies. For example, if we look at the literature on Indian development, I think we have learned a lot from the comparative study of development experiences in different parts of India. For example, we've learned that Kerala was very far ahead of many other states in terms of social indicators. We've learned to understand how this has happened. This has drawn our attention to the importance of education in development. Then we've discovered all kinds of dimensions to the importance of education, and particularly of women's education in development, whether it's for demographic change, whether it's for economic growth, whether it's for social change, or for that matter for the quality of democracy. So we have learned all kinds of things like that I think are very important for practical purposes. And yet sometimes it doesn't seem to add up to that much. And I remember 2 years ago we had a seminar here in the same room which the Chief Minister attended for some time about poverty. And I remember feeling a little bit sorry for the Chief Minister because he had come here and given quite a bit of time to listen. It seemed in the hope that perhaps all these luminaries, development economists and social scientists who had come from far and wide to talk about rural poverty would come up with something that might actually be useful for somebody who's sitting in the hot seat of the Chief Minister in a state like Bihar. And actually, meanwhile, we were discussing a lot of measurement issues, headcount ratio versus Sen index versus FGT1, FGT2, and so on and so forth. And it didn't really seem to have much practical bearing. And then the Chief Minister made a long speech, which I remember quite well, with a very enlightening account of the BPL survey in Bihar, which explained how the entire machinery had been mobilized for weeks, if not months, to carry out this impossible BPL survey to find out who is below the poverty line and above the poverty line, and so on and so forth. And that opened up a whole range of ground realities which seem to me to be extremely important if we want to talk about poverty in Bihar, which were completely absent from the seminar. So I think what I'm just giving one example where I feel that as a social scientist we don't seem to be able to contribute as much as we would like to do, in spite of having or supposedly having so much knowledge. And I think sometimes it's even worse than that. Sometimes not only do we not know more than others, sometimes we have blinkers that make us know less. We have a kind of deformation through the training that we have gone through that make us that make it more difficult for us to see things that are very important and that are much more obvious to others because it's part of their day-to-day realities. To give a simple example, it's very easy today to go through an entire training in economics, including a PhD, without ever hearing the word exploitation. So we don't think about exploitation. We learn about utility theory and consumer theory and theory of the firm and the general equilibrium. And even if we do a development course, we'll hear about all kinds of things. But we may never hear about exploitation as if it didn't exist. And therefore, when we go out in the field, we don't think in those terms. And yet, anyone who has spent time in rural India, or for that matter, urban India, and seen the conditions in which people live, exploitation is constantly with them. It's a constant part of their daily lives. And for them, it's a very concrete thing. They don't need to conceptualize it. It's right there. And for us, it's a whole learning experience to rediscover that because of a whole training that has made it difficult for us to think of certain things that are actually very important. I'll just give you one more example. And also to convey that I'm also talking of blinkers that I have myself developed. I'm not pointing the fingers at others. I'm also conscious, looking back at my training as an economist and the different things I've done as a development economist that even today there are still many blinkers to shed. I was a co-author of a book some time ago called Hunger and Public Action that was in late 1980s. And I'm astonished looking back at the book to see that we could write a book of 300 pages on the subject of hunger and famines without mentioning the word war. Whereas all the famines in the world in the last 35 years